So I have been an entrepreneur for 19 years. I started off in retail. My business partner, Attilio, made me a partner in his business when we were both way younger. I was actually 18, so still a kid, and we grew that business into an $8 million business. We had 12 retail stores. We were across 3 states. We had 120 employees. And it was a real boot camp on how to run a business. And that was actually, it seems like a lifetime ago. I feel like every time I say that, I'm talking about someone else. But that was where Alive actually came from. Alive started 17 years ago as a newsletter for that retail business. And thankfully, we were running that business alongside doing a newsletter. So at that time, I didn't have to figure out how Alive was going to make any money. It was just a passion project. It was something that we were in love with telling stories. At the time, it was health and fitness. That's where the name Alive came from. And so we were like, okay, we're just going to talk about all the things we care about, like healthy food and fun workouts. And then that turned into mental health, and that turned into fashion. And the next thing you know, we started covering the areas and topics that we really felt were relevant to an audience in St. Louis. So that's a little bit about the background, but in that process, we became marketers. And it's funny because we never would have described ourselves as that at the time. We just were figuring out how to stay in business, right? Like in the beginning, it's just like survival. And so here we had built this big retail business. And then I don't know if everybody remembers when there were several key ingredients that were banned in the health and fitness industry. The one that's kind of best known is ephedrine. And when that happened, that took out about 40% of our business overnight. And we were like, oh man, we're really upset about that. I mean, it was not easy, but we were like, we kind of love this magazine business. And so is there an opportunity to figure out how to take this thing that we love and make it a real business? And I think that's what we're here tonight really to talk about. So what is so hard about the financial parts of the business is I think so many times as creatives especially, we start off with an idea that we're passionate about. We're excited, we have a product, and we're like, wow, this idea is so great. And if we can just get it in front of people, then I'm going to be able to do the work I want to do. And what one of my mentors has taught me is that really being in business is about fulfilling a need. So it's a little bit reverse engineering than what a creative would typically do, which is, a creative is a lot of internal processing, right? You made a face, so I guess that resonated with you. But right, it's like, okay, what's my story? What's my point of view? What's my perspective? And all of those things are incredibly important and valid. And then all of a sudden, you've spent some time trying to figure out, like, well, what is it that I want to share with the world? You come out with that thing. You're doing visioning and stuff, of course, people like Meg. It's like, okay, what is this thing that I want to share? And now it's like, all right, how am I going to take this thing, this idea, this vision, and actually create a business out of it? And the business goes from being about you to being about your customer. And it's at the intersection of that you actually have the opportunity to change, I always say change the world, right? So that's the opportunity. And for some people it works and for some people it doesn't work, but that's the intersection that we're really looking for, is where your point of view meets the customer's point of view. And if you can find that sweet spot, then that's where you can make money and do what you love. So all of us are sort of on that journey together, and it doesn't happen overnight, but I'm lucky enough that with Alive, we've been in business long enough that not only did we start, we were really funded originally through our retail stores, so we had the luxury of finding our point of view, finding our craft, and having another business fund it. And then all of a sudden we were like, oh no, we want to just do this thing. How are we going to make money? So we hired some salespeople who had actually experience in media sales. And then they told us, oh, you're talking about health and fitness. No one cares about health and fitness in St. Louis. Now, you have to remember this was 19 years ago, well, 18 years ago. So 18 years ago, it was about a year before we started, that we were like having these conversations. I was like, oh, right. Like there was one resale store that sold like used fitness equipment. And that was it. And none of the gyms would take out advertising. And so it was like, okay, well, who is your customer going to actually be? It was less about the readership at that point in time, because it was free magazine. And it was more about who are the advertisers going to be. And so it really began this process for us that at first it was just like, okay, well then what can we be? Oh, we're going to be the cool city magazine. So we had to go through the process of becoming that. And then, as all of you know, the recession happened. So we had to start over again. I mean, overnight, we lost half of our revenue. And so here we had started with, having this retail business. Then we went through the time period of no longer having that retail business. And we had to figure out what the business model was going to be. Then the recession hit, and all those advertisers who had all that extra money were like, we don't have any money. And I mean, if you remember that moment in time, even though St. Louis wasn't hit as much as other markets, it was really scary. Everyone was really questioning everything. And so all the advertisers pulled, and we had to survive that. So we have gone through all of that up until this little thing called websites happened. And now it sounds crazy, but when we first started, we didn't have a website. And really no one did, because 18 years ago, not a lot of people had websites. It was still kind of a weird thing. And so we had to figure out what kind of a company we were going to be if all of a sudden people weren't as interested in that hard copy publication, which we still make. We do it quarterly now. We have a bi-monthly publication guided you might all have seen, but we had to reinvent ourselves again. So I say this because I feel like this is any entrepreneur who has figured out how to stay in business and create a sustainable business is really good at just reinventing as needed. And trust me, there were moments where I was like, what am I doing? This sucks. I don't want to have to do this again, There's certainly been those moments. But for the most part, you just sort of have to go into it recognizing it's never going to just be a template that you follow. It's certainly not in the media business, which is always changing. So now we have Novel, which is our agency. So we're primarily funded through Novel, and we do the publication Alive really as our point of view for the agency. So it's our opportunity to be able to show people what we care about and what we stand for, which is really people like you, entrepreneurs and artists and makers who are across the middle of America. And Guided is our hip city magazine. So still true to our roots, we have a publication that connects people on where to go and what to do in St. Louis. So, sorry, that was kind of a lengthy introduction, but that's tonight what we're really going to talk about. Do you have a question? Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Does at any point, if anybody has anything to ask, please, this is numbers, so we're just going to have to please have a conversation as much as possible, because it's not the most entertaining stuff. So if you want to go to the first slide. So I talked a little bit about this, but I think in business, and I want to hear from all of you on exactly what your business is so that I can put some of this stuff in context. But I think for a lot of us, it certainly began for me this way. It starts as a whole lot of passion, and we're so excited. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, awesome, how are you going to make money? And you're like, what? I don't want to talk about that. It's like dirtying up my cool idea. I just wanted to do this great idea. And you're then forced to really think about okay, how is this going to actually sustain my livelihood? Can it? And I'd say, with all the entrepreneurs I've ever talked to, some people land on it doesn't. It doesn't end up being the source of your livelihood. It ends up being a side thing that fulfills something else. So just knowing that is a place that I think that Now more so than ever, people are like, we've got like 3 different things that we do, and that can be really great in itself. But if you want to take your idea and you're ready to move that idea, that is your point of view, it is your concept, and you want to figure out how to make that sustainable, then there's going to be some amount of sacrifice usually. And that's something that you might say, well, I don't want to sacrifice anything. Okay, then I'd keep it in the hobby category. But if you really are ready to go, okay, I don't love that everyone loves the turtlenecks, and so now I have to mass produce the turtlenecks, but I get it. There's like a line of 15 things, and that's the one thing that everybody wants, so I'm going to make it in 10 colors. Even though it doesn't fulfill this artistic need I have inside of me, that's the business piece of it. I guess I should say in my background, I am one of the founders of St. Louis Fashion Week, so I speak a lot in apparel because I've worked with a lot of designers. But that, I think that that's just a reality that a lot of us go through at some point in time. It's like, okay, there was a point in time, I don't know how long everybody's been watching Alive, but there was a point in time where Alive was more of a luxury magazine. So anybody who's been watching us for a very long time remembers that there was a point in time, I wouldn't say we were Ladue News, but we were like, definitely for an affluent audience, it was about high fashion and luxury items. And we had, a lot of advertisers that I didn't feel totally emotionally connected with. In that luxury space, I didn't feel like I had a lot in common with it, but it was an important part of our business. So I think, basically at a point in time, if you want to take it from a hobby to a business, in that intersection that we talked about of your point of view and your customer's point of view, what do you do? And I think, again, I'll just go back and say this one more time, what my mentor said. I love it. I go back to it all the time. If you want to make more money, solve a bigger problem. And it's not emotional, and it's not about you as an artist. I think that has always been something that, I try to return to when sometimes we're like, shoot, how do we make this model shift? So you can go to the next one. So how do we do that? So it's about understanding your customer. And, again, I think when we start off in business, a lot of times it's like, when we first start off, for example, with our stores, we had this luxury with the magazine of like all these people who knew us through the health and fitness world, who I think sort of felt sorry for us, so they were like, I don't know, we'll like take out an ad because like you guys like, I feel sort of sorry for you, like it doesn't really seem like it's going great, right? And then that'll sustain you for a moment, right? And then there's people who are like, no, I really like what you're doing. Maybe they buy once or twice. But, you're like, wow, like how am I actually going to make enough, create enough customers to actually make this a business? And so it's really understanding who your customer is. Part of that's driven by your price point. Part of it's you spending time in the shoes of your customer, which is something that in the media business we've done for a long time, right? So we used to do this activity where we create, and by the way, art was not my thing, so forgive me, but we create like a persona. And let's call the persona, since we have, 2 Amy's who work for us, so we'll just go with the Amy name. And Amy is a mom. She lives in Kirkwood. She drives an Audi. She eats granola for breakfast. She has 2 kids. She's recently divorced. She does yoga on the weekends. She likes music festivals. So we would do these activities, and we still do it all the time, to really put ourselves in our customers' shoes. And you'll hear these terms, it's like creating personas. Some of you who are in corporate America would know, would hear those things. Like sometimes they're like, oh, the Zach, and like Zach is the millennial. And then they actually talk about Zach on a regular basis, and they're like, oh, what would Zach like? And what does Zach do on the weekends? And by the way, what type of media does Zach like? And what types of platforms is Zach on? Is he on Instagram? Yes, he is, because he's a millennial. Is he on Facebook? No, he just went off a year ago with all of his friends after they did a week-long detox. Okay. Is he on Snapchat? He went on Snapchat for like 6 months and then didn't really feel like it was a place he wanted to be. We think about every single thing about how he consumes media, about how he lives his life, about how she lives her life, so that we can understand, number one, what do they want from us as a brand? Number two, where can we reach them, right? Like, should we take out an Instagram ad or should we do a Facebook ad? All of that goes back to how well we know that customer. But the other piece of this, of course, is, how much money does Amy make? And so knowing how much money Amy makes gives me some idea around her discretionary income, so that if I'm trying to sell a necklace to her, I can say, oh, this necklace, Amy can afford a $200 necklace. Now, maybe I have to build the brand to justify that $200 necklace to her, but Amy can afford a $200 necklace. So I want to figure out how to have Amy as my target buyer. Or we might say, part of my mission is to be accessible. So I want my necklaces to be at that $60 price point, never more than $60. That's going to be on the high end. It really should be between $30 and $60. Okay, great. Then that will dictate what our price point is and what the quantity of those necklaces are. So, as much as we're going to talk about numbers tonight, it really does go back to humans, right? If we don't know this component, if we don't understand who this person is and what their life is like and how we're going to reach them, because that's going to dictate our advertising budget, and what they'll pay, then it's really hard to do all the other pieces. So I don't want to get too far into the branding and messaging piece of this, but it's also part of this is understanding the messaging that's going to resonate with this customer. And so when we're thinking about what that marketing plan will look like, whether that's email marketing, social media, or actually making direct phone calls in some cases, understanding this person will also dictate really what that messaging strategy looks like. So I guess before we move off of customer, I feel like this one's so important. Does anybody have any questions? No, you're like, go to the numbers. All right. So we can go to the next slide. This is actually on your agenda. If any of you follow Hackwith, then not Hackwith, Elizabeth Suzanne out of Nashville, she posted it on social media. And one of the things I say most frequently at maker pop-ups is, you're not charging enough. You're not charging enough. Oh my God, you're not charging enough. And we're not going to go all into why we as women don't always charge quite as much, sorry to the guy in the room, but as much as men. But we're not going to go into all that. But the way that she laid this out here, and it's the image of the blouse that she priced at $185. I just loved this. I was like, oh my God, this is what I'm always trying to explain to people, but I love how she broke it down. So if you look here, what's the cost to produce? So this is also known as cost of goods sold, which is what I'm going to call it in the worksheet that I gave to you. So she's got her labor costs, the cut, sew, pocket. She has her material costs laid out. She has her wastage spelled out. Then she has okay, this is what the exact cost of goods sold is, but now what does the gross profit margin look like? And she has her operating costs and her net profit. And one of the things that I love that she did here was she said net profit and why it's important. So what is she putting that net profit in? Which, by the way, $185, if you've ever bought a $185 top or dress or shoes, you go, God, $185, they must be making a killing. Right? Well, no, because you guys are all entrepreneurs. $18.50. And what is she doing with that $18.50? Reinvesting in the business, new facility, healthcare, and new benefits and new projects. So one of the things that I talk about for writers or photographers or people who have a creative business where they are in the business, they don't have necessarily the luxury of working on the business, they have to work in the business, is always making sure that a part of your pricing structure allows you to strengthen your point of view. What do I mean by that? It means your time, I'm taking pictures for 2 hours, is not the only time you should be considering. But it's also when you went to the museum, when you were reading a really important novel, when you were out looking at a garden, while you were meditating. All those things that you were doing in order to get to that place as a creative, to show up as that creative, is also a part of your fee structure. And if you're not pricing yourself at a level in which you're protecting your time, then your point of view is not going to be as strong as your competitor's point of view. And so taking that trip to Paris is actually a business expense for a creative. We need to go to places and travel the world and see different perspectives. If we don't, then we're not going to have that strong point of view. So I think this is really good for anybody who's making a physical product. If you're in that professional service space, I always think about, like, what are you doing outside of actually working? And are you charging enough to make sure that you can live a good quality life as well as invest in your point of view? So thinking about pricing, I had one CFO who said to me, your pricing should be, you say, how much will your customer pay? Or they say, how much will the market bear? And how much do you want to charge? So the market will bear $80. I want to charge $170. Usually it's somewhere in between. That's where your golden spot is for that price point. So I think, what's challenging is where it's like, oh, well, that seems easy. Currently people kind of want to spend $80. I want to charge $150, so I'm going to go at $120. But the issue is like, well, is this the right customer? These are the questions that haunt us, right? I don't know, like, maybe I'm talking to the wrong people. Like, if I was talking to the right people, then I could charge more. So that's true. But until you find those new people, you have to stay in business, right? And so that's why they always say, you should have a percentage of your customers, 10%, that you're always rotating out. They tend to be the noisiest customers and the ones who pay the worst rates or the worst price point. And sometimes they're very important. Like, they might be a family member who supported you in those beginning years, but they won a lot, right? And so then it's like, all right, well, I'm going to keep reducing how much I'm doing of that type of work as I increase these new markets. So again, just sharing with you some of the things that have been really helpful for me. Is this a place where you all are at right now? Is what price point should I be at? I don't think so. Not in my experience.
So I have a question for you though. I'm preparing to launch
Yeah.
a children's boutique, and I want to say I kind of want to have a range because I want to appeal to multiple audiences, and I don't have just one single target, I guess, from a price point perspective. So how do you engage y'all to be appealing, but also want to offer kind of basic essentials to, luxury, not necessarily luxury, but princess type dresses and, things.
Oh,
that
Princess,
that
yeah. What part of town?
So I'm starting off with an online boutique.
Okay,
But I will be participating in pop-up events
Good.
and at farmers markets. So
Okay.
I will be visible in the city too, so I want to be able to bring those items with me.
okay. And then are you making the items, or are you?
It'll be a mixture.
Okay, cool. So high-low is huge right now. So I think you're in a situation right now where you can do both. And it used to be like you were either luxury or you were not, and then you couldn't like cross those lines. And now I feel like the whole world has shifted, and that's not how we shop, and that's not what we're interested in. So you go into these like really high-end boutiques in LA, and they've got like, vintage, and they've got things at a really lower price point. And so I think you can do that. I think you've got to figure out what the model is for your markup, and then just be consistent across the board, but figure out how to find your voice, because ultimately it should be an intersection for you with the audience as well. It should feel natural. And I think that's like the hardest thing is like, well, how am I going to talk to Instagram? Because how am I going to talk to, these affluent people at the same time I'm talking to people that, I'm really trying to be more accessible for? And it's like, okay, whoa. We just need to be talking as ourselves. And that's, as soon as I hear that, I'm like, no pressure to be anything but what you are. And the audience is going to engage with you the very most with just getting to know you and your story, and that you're trying to do something different, and you want, women to feel empowered by being princesses.
And their children, the little princesses.
Oh no, I like both. I meant that. Yeah, it's like, that's awesome. I guess I said women, but I guess I think of little girls as women.
But no, that's evolution. Women in tutus, I love it.
Well, yeah, I want to be a princess, clearly. So, yeah, who else is struggling with pricing? This is a big one for designers, a really big one for designers.
I struggle with this for sure. I'm a lettering artist that sells paper goods and products.
Yeah.
So finding that perfect model that encompasses what, the labor side of it, but also staying competitive within the market, but also valuing my time, especially if I'm a work-from-home mom. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors, and it's that balance of I want people to buy my stuff, but I also want I want them to know the value in what I'm doing, and the quality behind the product. And so yeah, I even after 4 years of being a lettering artist, this is still probably my biggest struggle, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think what is so challenging, you said it, you hit it right on the head, which is I want people to buy my stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what, in being an entrepreneur, is the scariest thing in the world, is that you're going to create this thing and nobody's going to buy it. Right. And that somehow that's going to be reflective of you and your value. And that's been my experience. And I've been there, and I've sold services for a lot less than I should have. I put my team through a lot more work than I should have, because I was scrambling to stay in business. So I've been there. So I can't say like, oh, I don't know, I've never done that before. Like, no, I've done it. And, we still struggle with site, we say, oh, well, we could do it for this. Oh, we're going to go up against those guys. We know they'll charge this, but we could do it for that. So I think part of it is getting to that place of like, I'm going to do it as long as I'm getting paid well. The people that I employ are getting paid a fair wage. I'm not driving myself crazy. I'm not driving a team of people crazy. And then I'll worry about doing it, right? Like, as long as I'm getting all these things met, I'm willing to do it. But what I'm not willing to do is to sacrifice, my time, to sacrifice my value, to sacrifice the team of people that I'm bringing into this. And in the beginning, people get excited. They're like passionate about it. They're like, oh, I'll work for free. My mom, she still sometimes works for free for me. She's my mom. So, people get excited. They want to help. They want to be a part of something. But eventually, if this is going to become a sustainable business, we have to get to the point of people have to make a fair wage. And they have to be able to do it in a way that's not going to drive everyone crazy. But it's hard because you're very vulnerable. And in this society, vulnerability is not something that we get a lot of support on, right? It's not like we went through math class, like you're looking at this going, oh yeah, I remember this. But vulnerability training, pretty sure most of us didn't get vulnerability classes. And so that's really what that ties into, and it's something I still struggle with, but thanks for saying that, as I think it's something that's real.
Can you talk a little bit about the optics of raising your price to your sort of existing customer base? I have a lot of word of mouth, which is fantastic, but I know that they're also probably saying, and I got it all for the low price of whatever, and as I'm learning about my business, I know that I do need to increase the price. How do you navigate that?
I just say, my capacity is becoming smaller and smaller, and as my capacity goes down, my prices will go up. Yeah, that's running a business. Like, doesn't that feel
Is there
good?
a strategy to timing or just like let this
No, you don't owe that to anyone. I think to me, like,
I've done it 4 times now, and I've never skipped a beat with my clients, with anybody. And now, if you have a contract with somebody at a certain rate, obviously you honor that.
right.
But absolutely, and don't be ashamed of it at all. Yes.
Can I add something? Is that okay?
Of course.
Okay. I've changed my prices, or I used to change my prices all the time because I knew where I wanted to be. And so I started really low, and those clients were just the worst, right? They take everything from you, and they're getting everything for $50, and then I went up, and I went up, and I just lost people, and I felt bad about it. So what I did was, when those people that came in at $50 actually come back later on because they see the value that I provide, then I might give them a special one-time rate or, an extra perk or something extra, but they still come in at that high price because that's what my price is now. So they might get a little extra, but, and then it kind of makes everyone feel like warm and fuzzy, and then it doesn't make you feel so, because we do a lot of guilt, right? That's what we do here. We're like, oh man, I can't charge $5,000 for that.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, but that guy over there charges it, and he's half as good. So it's just like, yeah. So always for me, it's like always add an extra value makes it feel better for everybody, and then I'm not discounting myself or giving my stuff for free. So,
Yeah, annual rate cards too, right? So you have quarterly rate cards if you're right there at that fast growing. Oh, that was last year's rate card, or that was last quarter's rate card. We do it based on capacity and the rate card shifts. And I think that's, a big part of what you're saying too, is just unemotional. This isn't it's nothing to do with friendships or emotion when it comes to the pricing. It's really what is the service that you're delivering and what's the value of that service? And I think, I don't want to be totally gender focused, but I do feel like, people with more feminine energy, we tend to carry pricing with us in a way that's really tied to our value. And I think it's just, a matter of the system in which we're all a part of, that we've all co-created, right? So it's just something that I'm always cognizant of, is that, as I watch people who have more masculine energy, they're just like, this is my price. That's my price. You don't want to pay it? Somebody else is going to pay it, right? That energy, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so bad at that. I'm like, oh my God, this is my price. If you feel okay about it, I mean, I really like you. I don't want to charge you that. And like, you know, it's a lot. Like, I'm constantly in that space too.
Can I say something to that?
Oh, please, yeah.
I hate that you have to do this, like the masculine energy thing, but I created a guy that works for me named Sean, and whenever we have to talk about pricing, or with a customer or a client, Sean talks to them. And I don't know why, but Sean can be way more direct than I can, even though it's me.
That's
By
amazing.
the way, people respond to that.
Oh my God.
I get more clients with Sean.
Wow.
And Sean's always at the office when he needs to take phone calls for some reason, so.
Should put Sean out for hire. But even
Right.
I have that, I think it's just a matter of having confidence in what you do. And, you know, obviously there's value enough in what we're all trying to put out there and create. So just backing yourself up in that. And, you know, I mean, it maybe like not saying masculine energy if you don't connect with that, but just like having confidence in what you're putting out there. And yeah, just like, this is what I'm worth, and the right people will come your way.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally right. I think, you know, part of it is the more time we spend doing things like this, creating space, getting clear about like who we are and what we do, then the more confident we are, right? I mean, really a business plan is who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it? A business plan is who are you, what do you do, and why do you do it? And the more you can articulate that, the more money you're gonna make. 100% the more money you're gonna make. And so many of us are like, who am I? I don't know, who do you want me to be?
The other thing I was gonna say to that is, especially being like a service-based business where referrals are huge, definitely incentivize your referral process. Like, come up with something super special for any referrals and make it known. Like, talk about it on your social media, talk about it, send thank you cards to everybody after they do an event here, and put some sort of incentive in there for referrals. That's what's changed my business, really.
That's great. No, I think it's valuable for everybody. So my brain is a little fuzzy, sorry, I'm under the weather, but what is that called when you, like your first customers, you know what I'm talking about? Like the people who like, they do it with investors. Dang. I was gonna say, like you will tell people like you can be a part of the,
Right.
anyway, it'll come to me, sorry. But I think that's the other thing too, like exactly what you're saying, you could make them brand ambassadors by giving them an official name and being like, you were a part of the very first group of people, you got this really great introductory rate. I know you didn't know it, but just so you know, it's about half of what it will be for your friends. And by the way, you can help us get the word out, you know, we'll be offering this, you know, slightly discounted rate for another 3 months, whatever that is. I love that. I think that's great. How do you make your customers your brand ambassadors? So when we come back to that three-tiered concept of who am I, what do I do, and why do I do it, a lot of times what we focus on the most as entrepreneurs, and specifically entrepreneurs with more feminine energy, is why do I do it? And we have this beautiful mission, and we want to help people, and we want to change the world, and we want to add something beneficial, we want to add something beautiful, we want to create happiness in the world, whatever that is, right? The why. But we don't necessarily figure out the who am I piece of it. What do I uniquely offer? What is unique to my story and my point of view that I can claim but other people can't claim? And then what do I do? And I can only speak from my own experience, but you know, we changed what we've done because we're like, oh, you need events? We do events. You need video? We do video. You need whatever you need, we're gonna do it, right? We've all been there when you're trying to survive for 18 years. You know, we've done a lot of things. And then you are like, okay, really don't wanna do those things anymore. It's not profitable, it makes us crazy, it's not, you know, work that really gives us a lot of satisfaction, but most people who go into business end up doing some pieces of business that they don't really want to do. So that what do you do piece becomes really, really, really important. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, big bad budget. The reason why our budget, which is 18 years later still called the big bad budget, is called the big bad budget was because we were working with a financial guy, and we had so many versions of our annual budget because we kept tweaking it over and over and over again. And this was a while ago. So like the saving file names thing, we didn't really have down pat quite yet. So we were like not version 1, version 2, version 3, but instead it was like the budget, the real budget, the real budget. Really, this is the budget. And finally, the budget that we landed on was the big bad budget. And so we still call it the BBB, which is ridiculous, but some things stick. And this, I think, illustrates what budgets are all about, which is, they say this a lot in the startup world, but I do think it has a lot of relevancy in our world, which is experiment, measure, experiment, measure, experiment, measure. That's how you create a business model. Everybody says, how did you figure out how to make money? How did you figure out how to stay in business that long? And I'm like, I made a whole lot of mistakes, and we were really diligent about measuring things. So yes, we create beautiful magazines, and it seems so, and there's been phases of it that were so glamorous, and there was all these parties and, fashion shows and all these things that were, quite frankly, very distracting, not necessarily always money makers. But yeah, there's that part of us. But if you're internally, if you know us, we have dashboards and graphs, and we're constantly talking about KPIs and ROIs. Anyone who is around me long enough is like, oh my God, we have to talk about KPIs and ROIs. So KPIs in marketing, key performance indicators, and ROIs in business, return on investment, they give us a framework in which to be creatives. They help us be better creatives. With those things in place, we can do better creative work. I always think of them as creative restrictions. And so I think for a lot of us, it's like, oh, I either have to be this or I have to be that. I have to be a Fraggle or I have to be a doozer. Well, you can be a Fraggle and a doozer, but the Fraggle part of you is going to need those doozers. Remember? Those doozers were like there. They were making sure that the Fraggles could be creative, could be able to live in their happy little Fraggle kingdom. So big bad budget starts with setting revenue goals. And sometimes people say to me, well, I don't know how to set revenue goals. How am I going to set revenue goals? What does that even mean? What should I expect? So my brother and sister-in-law started a restaurant, and through that process, we had that conversation. It was like, okay, well, how are we going to figure out what our revenue goals are going to be? So we said, okay, if we have 10 people come in every day, and those 10 people spend an average of $12, then this is what the average revenue will be every day. And if we're open 6 days a week, then we can multiply that by 6 times 52. So 52 weeks out of the year. And that was how we came up with the first budget, to figure out exactly how many customers they had to get in and to figure out exactly what they had to charge. That gave us a framework to work on. Now, the restaurant is Lulu's, so they had a little bit more than 10 people who came in within their first couple of weeks, and so it really became a lot less necessary than what we originally expected when we decided to do a vegan restaurant in the city of St. Louis. But I always go back to that example as people are trying to start a business, is like, well, where do you begin? You just begin somewhere. And then, Robbie and Lou were just so passionate and so thoughtful and like executing, and both had a background in being entrepreneurs. And so they just measured numbers, right? So they put little graphs up behind that cash register. Like, we need to have 5 customers a day. We need to have 10 customers a day. We need to have, this is what the sales need to be. And the team became a part of the culture. It's not like an icky thing. It's like, we gotta stay in business. We gotta buy more sweet potato falafels. How are we gonna buy more sweet potato falafels? Well, we gotta sell to 10 people a day, and we know that our price point has to be at this place. If you've been in business, then you can say, what have I sold in the last 3 months? And that gives you your revenue trends that then you can forecast. Bottom line, I know I'll do, let's say I've been doing $1,000 a month. I know I'll be doing $3,000 a quarter. So I can say I'm going to do $12,000 this year. And that gives you that starting point. Then you measure, hopefully you blow it out of the park, and it's like, well, I did 50,000. It's like, great. Well, then why did I even create this budget? So that you know when you are successful. And that's where it begins, is it just, you start with measuring, and if you build a culture of measurement, then you can steadily see what the next levers that you need to push are. Because really this is figuring out when you add a different division to the business, it adds a certain complexity. And then you go, okay, what's the gross margin on this new piece of business? And at first, maybe it's like, whoa, there's a lot of revenue. It's very exciting. And then you look at the margins and you're like, I feel like I'm working so hard and I have no more money at the end of the year than what I had last year, and I was doing half the work. Okay, well, what are your margins on that new division? You start to do the numbers and you go, wait a minute, the revenue is high, but the cost to do that business is also really high. So is there a new way of doing that business? Maybe I can only keep 75% of that revenue. So an example of that, I'll pick on Robbie and Lou again, was Lulu's. They had that food truck. If you remember, they started with a food truck. So it was a great way of building a brand. And Lou was really good with social media. So it was very natural that they were able to be in that food truck space. But eventually, all those private events and things were very high in terms of complexity and very low in terms of the margin. And so it after a while was a part of the business that they could phase out. And this is the iteration that happens when you experiment and measure, and you're constantly looking at it, and you can know which places where you want to invest more. So instead, they said, okay, we're going to sell the food truck, we're going to open up upstairs, we're going to have a ping pong bar. So we're going to expand the part of the business that's doing really well, and we're going to minimize the part of the business that's doing great. I mean, they had no complaints. Like, everybody wanted Lulu's to come to their wedding, It was like a thriving part of the business, but it just didn't have the margins. That is, I don't want to bore you if you already know some of this stuff. Okay, so cost of goods sold, or she calls it cost to produce. So it depends on what industry you're in. But cost of goods sold is more of like an accounting term. It's the expenses that are related to the revenue. So what do I mean? I'm selling this water bottle. This water bottle costs me $2. I'm selling it for $4. But the way that I'm selling it is I'm doing an Instagram campaign. I've got an administrative assistant who's helping me to make sure everything's running smoothly in the office. I've got office supplies. I've got all these things that are going around. But if I don't sell this water bottle, I don't have that $2 cost. So the $2 cost is the only cost of goods sold from all the things that I just mentioned. It's tied to the revenue. If it goes away, if this sale goes away, I still did Instagram. I still had an administrative assistant. So that's what that cost of goods sold is. it becomes really important, when you're building your budgets. Because what happens is you want to build a budget. You're like, okay, I want to make $80,000. And I want to figure out how to make $80,000. How much money do I need to do in order to do $80,000? Well, you have some costs that are fixed costs. Those are considered your overhead. That's your rent, your utilities, your salaries if you have them, your health insurance. Those things are fixed. Every month, Anthem's going to be charging you, right? Every month you've got that AT&T bill for your cell phones. You've got those expenses that will never change. So let's say that's a chunk of like $2,000. But then if you say, okay, I want to make this $80,000, how do I figure out how to get to that number? Whatever you're selling, let's call it a widget. Whatever you're selling, that widget, the more you sell, your costs go up because the widget costs money to make. So if I'm selling this for $4 and I sell 100 of them and it's $2, yes, I sold $400 worth of water bottles, but that cost me $200. If I sell $500, it costs me $250. So that cost of goods sold goes up in relation to the revenue. Why does this matter? It matters because as entrepreneurs we go, I can't put together an annual budget. How am I going to predict? How do I know what my costs are going to be? And it's because if we don't know that relationship between those numbers, it's impossible. You're right. It's totally impossible. But if you go, oh, I'm going to do $100,000 in annual revenue, and I know that $50,000 of that is going to go into my cost of goods sold, then I can look at what my administrative costs or my overhead costs are underneath that. And those are fixed. This is so not fun, but very important. So ask questions so that it can be processed, because this is not fun stuff, but it's really important.
Can you just walk through it one more time?
Yeah.
Please, if nobody's posted mine.
Oh my gosh, yes, of course. So if you look at this, again, not a beautiful magazine. I do have one of those available if anyone's like, why did we invite her? So if you see here, I have revenue 1, revenue 2, revenue 3. So if I am an apparel company and I have shirts, shorts, and t-shirts, those could be broken down by those 3 revenue streams. And then I could look at it and go, my cost of goods sold for my shirts, my shorts, and my t-shirts can go under that. If your cost of goods sold is consistent, then you don't have to worry about that. But for me, for example, in my company, the cost of goods sold for an event is not the same cost of goods sold as creating a video. So I have to divide those revenue streams out based on the cost of goods sold. Then you see here below that, it's gross revenue. Your gross revenue is when you take your revenue, $4, and subtract your cost of goods sold, $2, what's left over is that $2, which is your gross revenue. So you sometimes hear people be like, I don't know, is that gross or net? Okay, maybe that's just me. But that's what they're talking about, is it before your overhead expenses? Are we talking about your net profitability of what you actually get to take home? Or is it basically how profitable this product is for you? So then you go into your overhead expenses below, rent, salaries, benefits, software subscriptions, professional services, and office supplies. Those end up being a relatively controlled expense. And as your revenue goes up, they don't necessarily go up. Here's where it's confusing. If I start selling a whole lot more, my salaries are going to go up. You're right. So you have to, at some point go, okay, I doubled the size of my business, the people are gonna have to increase. And that would be affected in here. But for most of us, we usually have ourself and like 2 helpers, right? At this stage of the game, it's like me and 2 other people. So I know what that's gonna cost. I can put that in below here and I can start to project, and this is a half a year budget. So if you're trying to figure out how am I gonna make $80,000, you can do it with this. This is the template, and we could email this to everybody, right? Okay, so I'll send it to you in Excel, and you guys can have this. This can be a template budget for you to play with. And this has been really helpful for a lot of people. It's super, this, if you've seen, probably some of you have seen this. It's super common for people to use, but most of us don't use it. Because what happens is we start our business and we're like, I got an idea, I'm so excited. And then people are like, oh my God, I love it, I'll buy one. And you're like, oh my God, I'm like in business. And then it's like, now I'm just making stuff. And now I gotta like keep up with making stuff. And now I gotta keep going. And now, oh wait, now I need more stuff. Now I gotta hire someone. And now, oh shit, I heard there's QuickBooks. So then you get in QuickBooks and you're like, all right, I'm gonna put this money in. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I owe taxes. I owe taxes? No one told me I was going to owe taxes. Now I don't have any money. What happened? And we have no idea of how much revenue we've actually created over a 6-month period of time, how much expenses has actually been taken out of that, and at the end of the day, do we have a viable bottom line that's going to keep us in business? And guess what? This is everybody who starts. It's not like there's, just a select group of people. This is how business starts. I think if we knew everything going in, probably wouldn't start. You kind of got to go into it not knowing. And then you just start and you're like, oh, this is more complicated than anyone told me it would be. And you figure it out over time. But this, when I had somebody show me this, it's about 15 years ago that someone showed me this, and it became the big bad budget, it changed the way we approached everything. And by the way, for the owners, there was 3 of us. So it became a way for us to predict our salaries. Before that, it was like, what are we gonna get paid? I don't know. What are we gonna get paid? What's left? I don't know. You know what's left? Who's checked the bank account in a while? I don't have time. I got orders to get out, right? Like that's being entrepreneurs. So this helps you go, oh, I can actually make an income. Phew. Glad we figured that out. So this is, I think, hopefully a good template for you. When you look at this, do you look at it and go, well, my business can't fit into that? Or does this resonate? Do you see this as something that could be useful? Questions about it?
Where does tax fall into this? Does it matter?
So taxes are really cash flow. So that would really be more on your balance sheet of money that is owed. But because if you're operating on a tight cash flow situation, which many of us are, put it in there. It would be an overhead.
Okay.
Because you don't mean sales tax, do you?
Well, I guess it's like the yearly tax,
Yeah,
to pay on.
income tax.
Yeah.
Yeah, and business like licenses and permits and your personal tax and all of that. So that, we do put that in ours because, yeah, we want to account for it. If it's sales tax, then that should be calculated in your, God, it's been a while since I've done retail. So it would be in your revenue number, right? Like if you put it into QuickBooks, sales tax is in there. So it would be coming out of your cost of goods sold because it's not real.
Yeah. I can just say, one of the things I just do as an entrepreneur,
Yeah.
I just have a whole separate account. So, the taxes just go there. So then when it's time to pay sales tax, you just take it from that account. So it's just, it's just there. So, and the number equals. And it's like, here's your check. Just
Just give them a check. Cause I separate out at the beginning, like at the time, so it's just put it in that account and that's sales tax.
Yeah, and that's like another way of doing it. Like if you don't,
That's just one.
well, yeah, if you don't want to put it in here,
Yeah. I mean, it's there on the sheet, but.
Right.
technically
right. If you don't want to budget for it, like if you put it in this budget, then you know you have it,
Yeah.
right? Like you can rest easy.
Yeah, I put it there, but it's just, it's just.
But that's another way, because it's really a balance sheet item, and I don't want to get too lost in our accounting, but that's really where it belongs, and that's why she's doing that. It's a cash flow issue more than it is like, is this business working? Because ultimately, it's inherent in that net gain, so that is your taxable income. But you could put a below that, like if this was an actual real accounting document, I mean, I'm not an accountant. But if it was an actual accounting document, it would have under here, your net gain, taxable income as a line item. And then it would say what that is, and it would say your take home, So you could look at that. And if you're doing any kind of profit sharing, because you have multiple partners, that's actually very important to have on there. So I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, or if you do, profit sharing with your team, you should make sure the taxes come out before you look at it, because that's not really all your money. Some of it goes to Uncle Sam. Yeah.
Talk about setting the annual revenue goal. I'm try to make this brief. You gave the example of Lulu's and like this is X amount that they want to make, and then they broke it down by how many customers they would need to do that. So let's say that it's something less consistent, like maybe primarily pop-ups. Can that translate to product instead? So instead of how many people I would need, like how many I would need to sell X amount of this product to get to this and X amount of this
Yeah.
product to get to that. Is that still a
Yeah.
viable way of measuring that?
Yeah, let's do it. So, what is, do you mind me putting you on the spot? I think it's helpful if we can use actual, examples. So, what is the item and what's the price point?
$60.
Okay. And is it like jewelry or?
Gifts and decor.
Okay.
So,
And it's a $60 price point. And how much money do you want to make? Okay, so let's just start off with, no, it's not. Let's just start with, I want to make $40,000. Okay, so in 3 years, I want to make $40,000. Okay, that's, let's just kind of put something out there, right? What is your cost associated with this $60? And sorry to put you on the spot, and you can use fictitious numbers.
21.
Okay. I'm gonna just do 20 if that's okay. So, so our cost of goods sold is $20. So your entry point to the market, if I heard this correctly, was to do maker pop-ups.
Yes.
Is there any other way that you interface with the public to get your product out there?
A lot of it is word of mouth.
Okay.
That's probably the pop-ups are more mass.
Pop-ups?
I guess.
And then, do you sell online?
I'm starting.
Okay, so
Yes.
direct to the consumer. Okay, so I'm just going to say not yet for direct to consumer. So when you go to these pop-ups, how many people do you typically sell to? Yeah.
Pop-ups too, and it's so hard because it can vary.
Yeah. So what's your best and your worst?
20,
Does, yeah.
200. I'm just gonna say 20 and 200.
Okay, so we're going to stay on her. Do you?
Yeah, I wish 200.
Yeah, what's
I would
realistic?
say 12 to 25.
12 to 25. Okay. So we're going to do 12 to 25. So that's an average of $24.5. So hold on, don't know anybody watch, I'm gonna do some math. 40. So 24.5 is your average. Show 24.5 times 40 is 980. What are your other expenses related to the business that are ongoing? Do you have rent?
No, but,
Anything?
Materials,
Well, that's going to be in your $20.
okay,
But please say things like that because it's good.
okay.
Helps reinforce these things, yeah. What?
The booth fee?
Yeah, what is the cost? Yeah, what's your cost to go to market?
90.
Is that the same? People who do these all the time, is that?
It varies.
They vary, those go from like.
What's your most expensive to your least?
3
Okay.
to like 150.
So let's make 80 for your booth fee, okay? So, what else? Any other expenses?
Meals while you're at the show or anything like that, coffee.
What about like packs of coffee, you know, like
Yeah.
a bag, hard labor, career, you know, I always.
Yeah. Business cards.
Now, math is not my greatest strength, but we want to do, we have an average transaction of $60. Our cost of goods sold is $20. That gives us our gross revenue of $40. So per transaction, we're making $40. If we have 24.5 is our average amount of customers per show. We take 24.5 multiplied by $40, our gross. That gives us 980. We subtract our average booth fee, $80. That gives us $900 per show. If we want to make $40,000, we have to do 44 shows a year. Is that sustainable?
That's like almost everything.
Almost. So that helps us. So then how else can we go to market? Direct to consumer. So direct to consumer, then you start to think about, okay, what could this look like? What if I'm selling 10 a day? For that 10 a day, I have to spend $10 on Instagram. So then we take our $40. Why doesn't somebody else do it since I'm not feeling well?
$10 on Instagram, would it be in a way of
Advertising. Uh-huh. How are you going to get, yeah,
per month or
per day?
per day, $10 per day?
So it would be $390 is what you would end up.
So yeah, let's do this one together. We're getting super nitty gritty, but this is where it kind of helps sink it in, right? So we've got $40 per. We want to get to $40,000. We know that if we do $40 times 10 per day, that equals $400 per day minus $10 on Instagram. That gives us $390. $390 times 365 is $142,000. 350. So if we can do half of it, then that's 70,000. We can do a quarter of that and the booths, then we got a business. And this is the formula that you can use in order to get to these numbers of, if I want to get here, remember all those equations where they were like x plus, and you're like, when am I ever going to use that? Like, I'm never going to use that. This is actually, I'm like, God dang it, why didn't I? Right? So yeah, this is where this comes in, because it's all these like variables that it's just really like, how much money you want to make? And then you're like, okay, well shoot, I made $40,000, now I want to make $80,000. Now what does it need to look like? Okay, well, I've got the online thing going. I've now got 10,000 followers on Instagram. I have this great audience developed. I'm going to open up a storefront. See if I can mix it up, the revenue up in that way too. So I can get to know my customers on a face-to-face basis. For some people that makes sense, for some people it doesn't, right? But I think that's the idea, is that you begin to iterate your concept based on, okay, now I've made this amount of money. Can I add a complexity to the business? And then, you know, as you grow, you get to a certain size and it's all about, good businesses only do one thing and do it really well. So we have all these conflicting messages. So it's like, what I thought I should be doing multiple revenue streams to have diversity, to, you know, it's like, what's the what should I do? So of course, yeah, once you get to a certain point, you iterate again in a different way, where you might say, we don't need the food truck anymore. Like, we're doing well here, we're gonna stay in this lane, we're gonna focus so that we don't scatter ourselves and our team and not do this really, really well. The brick and mortar is now what we're gonna focus on. So, you know, it continues to evolve.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
What would you do with your service-based?
Like
The same?
professional services?
Yeah.
Is it just you, or can you scale with other people?
Let's go with a partner.
Okay, okay, great.
She would be her own, like, thing. Does that make sense? So, like, I'm a esthetician, she could be a gastro-assist, and we work together.
Yeah.
But,
Is she working for you?
no, we would share.
Okay. So then it's you, yeah, which is good. And then that's a part of your network. That's a part of your, yeah, then that's a part of your revenue model of getting additional clients, right? So it's really marketing strategy. But, you know, in terms of your actual business model, you are the business. So the name of the game in that business is all about maximizing what your rate is. So how do you maximize what your rate is now?
Well, right now I work for someone else.
Okay, so you're figuring this out. And can I go do this on my own?
Right.
So, yeah, right, okay, no one's telling, okay, yeah. And theoretically, right, okay, so theoretically, should you ever decide, it's all about what could you do that someone else doesn't do. And so how do you create an original experience for people that goes above and beyond their expectations? Maybe that's in the place that they visit, that you can make an extraordinary visit that way. Maybe it's in the essential oils that you use. Maybe it's in the quality of the products that you use. Maybe it's in your training as a master esthetician that justifies your ability to be able to charge a higher rate. Because that all becomes, like we were just talking about for this space, it all becomes capacity. So I'm gonna give you an introductory rate. I'm gonna start you off with, like, you know, if I could remember this word, you're gonna be a part of my foundational family. Can't think of it. And you're gonna get a introductory rate. I'm only gonna give it for a period of time. As soon as my capacity starts to fill up, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to increase my rates, but I want you to be a part of this. because you're a part of the beginning. So I think, a lot of the school of thought that I come from regarding business is, how do you figure out how, if you come up with this really magical experience that is unique to you, that justifies your ability to charge more and more, so that your hourly rate goes up higher, so that you can work fewer hours, so that you can go and travel. So you can go travel the world and go to the best spas in the world and do research and development. Sounds like a good life, right? So how are you going to justify doing that? You're going to have to figure out how to offer something that no one else does. And then once you do that, is there an opportunity to have people that you're training to do the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then that becomes where the business model goes from you being that owner-operator to you really having that scalable model. So a really good book that I recommend, if you people probably read it, it's old, but it's a good one, is E-Myth. You've read it? Yeah, it's a good one, right? It's a good one. E-Myth. E and then dash myth. And I just like the way he writes. Yeah, it's timeless, right? I mean, it's been around for a long time, but it's a good one. And he talks about, there's like a character, probably a fictitious character in the book that's like, she bakes pies. And like, do you want to be a pie baker? So my mentor frequently says to me, "You're baking pies." I'm like, "I'm baking pies." All right. Dang. 18 years later, still baking pies. All right. So, but that might be a good thing for you to think about as you think about, like, what would this journey look like? How would this look? Like, I don't want to go and do this on my own and work more. Yeah. Right. Creating a job for yourself. Right. So it's the difference between a business that is a job for that entrepreneur versus a business that's a business. And he talks a lot about working on the business instead of working in the business. So, but for services, it's more challenging. I do consulting work, and so I'm in that space too, where I would need to bring on a partner for some of the things that we offer, because it is really that thought leadership that it's that same thing, offering that specific service. So we have to find things that are template items in the business that you can really like figure out, like, okay, maybe this very special service in my esthetician business only I can do, but is there one service that I could train other people to do?
Is there can I
Cool.
offer a comment?
Yeah, please.
I'm in the service industry, and I remember when I first got started, and I'm 27 years in, but when I first got started, I was just, I had so much enthusiasm, but not a lot of training.
Mm-hmm.
But I did one thing well. It was so awesome because the whole plan was to build your own clientele, but I wasn't doing good at that. So I was slowly building my own clientele, but I could do eyebrow waxes. And
Yes.
because no one had time, because they had such strong clientele, I did everybody clients' waxes. I got really good at them.
Yeah.
And it became my business model to this day about maximizing time, where you can't put the quality in the quantity. It's kind of like, okay, what do I do well? Then I just become the master at that, because you can always do it faster. You can do it better than others. You can even prove that you can do it better than others. You can do it faster. And deciding what I want to make per hour, and not deciding how I'm going to make it. Just kind of make it in that area that I'm really good at.
How many eyebrow waxes would you do on one day?
Oh my God, in a salon where there was like 15 people, I would have like 25 eyebrow waxes on the books. and I would have maybe 3 clients that actually sat in my chair. So I would make more money doing everybody clients' eyebrow waxes
Right.
than I would my own clients.
Right, so this is this whole intersection of your point of view and what does the customer want.
Yeah.
And in so many ways, we're like, I don't do eyebrow waxing because I am, right? Like this happens. We're like, I don't do this thing. And it's like, oh, you don't do the thing that everybody wants. So how can you have the thing that everybody wants fund you so that you can do these other things and continue to grow the business? And I think that that's something, I've certainly learned over the years, as it's like, we're like, we don't want to do e-blast or whatever it is, in that given moment. And then it's like, oh, everybody wants this. Why are we resisting it? And let's just do what the need is, right? Like, what's the marketing? What's the
For
need?
you to get to the whole picture.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
it really
great.
did finance classes and finance more training so that I can be better at other things. Like it spearheaded everything up.
That's so great. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, so now everybody's got to find their eyebrow waxing thing, yeah. Myself included, we're still in the stage in our business where we're figuring out, we have this consulting work, but how do we create something like, a social media package or something that is not the whole thing, but it's something that we can duplicate over and over again consistently. And so, it's just, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's a good lesson for me too, just to remember.
Well, now I'm trying to find that in my new business, like what I do now. It's like, I'm looking for the eyebrows.
Yeah, right? Yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. So one of my friends owns The Vault. Are you guys familiar with The Vault? Okay. So I don't know if you've seen Sue McCarthy. She had the TV show, and she's wonderful. And she talks about, basically that she has this whole long story, and I can't do it well, so I'm not going to try to do it because she's hilarious when she tells the story. But basically there's a character that she's created that has this amazing fried chicken, and everyone wants the fried chicken, and they'll have lines and lines and lines of people to get that fried chicken. And so she always says, in retail, you just always got to find out what's your fried chicken. And so I think that's the same thing with your, eyebrow wax is just, there's a business piece of it, and then there's the passion piece of it. The business piece of it for us is consulting and content creation. The passion piece, we're still hanging on to it. We still love it. We're like, Brent, we haven't abandoned you, right? But this is not going to be the future. This is not going to be the moneymaker. We know that. That's okay. People see this in the agency space, and they're like, holy cow, you guys did that. This is beautiful. This is a work of art. So it really benefits us to have it. There's a real business outcome to it, but it's not the eyebrows. So I think that I'm ready for just any other questions. Let's see, do I have one more slide? Oh, yeah, I do, sorry. Ooh, I'll speed up. So another mentor said, businesses are built in small, consistent steps. And I think, they say change is created in small, consistent steps. But I always think about this too. What are we doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? And those daily, weekly, monthly rituals and steps that we take are what build our life, and they're what build our business. And so sometimes it's just like, oh my God, I got to have this great new idea. I got to have this great new campaign. I got to, what is going to save me? What is going to put me over the edge? And, I know, Meg, you're nodding your head smiling, because this is where business coaches are like, yes, it's just day in and day out, just being able to show up to the work. And if you're not good at that, which a lot of times entrepreneurs, we're really good with the idea. We're like, ta-da! And then we're like, oh, you have to do the same thing every single day? Da, 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 da. This is what I thought I was getting myself into, right? So guess what? You find a person who they love they love consistency, and they love schedules and calendars that are all consistent. I have a person who balances me out in that way, which is really, really useful and helpful. And then you hold yourself to those metrics as we were talking about. So when we were just saying, okay, where does your revenue come from? So many times I feel like we get stuck on like, I don't know, where's the revenue gonna come from? Well, I go to an event and I do this amount of money, but like what else, right? And so looking at it going, okay, I made a list of things: selling events, making phone calls, email marketing, Instagram posts. Any of these activities could lead to revenue. Some of them will work, some of them won't. That's where that experiment, measure, and then you start to get some numbers and you go, oh, when I make 10 phone calls, I get 1 phone call back. And every 3 phone calls back, I convert into a sale. And then once you know that, you're like, I have to make 50 phone calls a week in order to make the amount of money I want. You do another one of these, like $40 and right? You go, oh, I have to make 100 phone calls a week. I don't want to make 100 phone calls a week. Guess what? That's where you'd introduce a team member, right? And hopefully, you know, if you're just starting off, it could be a commission on a commission basis. So they make a percentage of the sale. Now, sorry to be this person at 8:40 at night, but where would the commission go for a sale in our budget?
Under salaries?
That is really, it's tricky because I would assume that too, but your commissions would go in your cost of goods sold. Why would your commission go in your cost of goods sold? Yeah. So if I give somebody $1 every time they sell that water bottle, where's my water bottle? Then it goes from this cost me $2, this cost me $3. So the more of these I sell, yay! The more the commission they make, they're like, yay! You put that in the wrong line, you're like, oh. You were excited, now you're not excited, right? Because all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm paying you $2,000 this month. Yeah, you're making more money than me. This is great. Why did I give you that money, right? So that's why it's so important to tie it so that when you're doing your projections, commission goes into your cost of goods sold. So any cost that when you sell it, it's inherent to the cost of the product. So you start adding in any of those things like a commission, then you want to make sure that it hits those cost of goods sold so that you, when you're doing, you're like going, okay, we're going to do $100,000 in revenue this year. And I know that when I do $100,000, 50% of that goes into my cost of goods sold, which covers all the cost of the product. And then you go into your administrative costs and you go, okay, and I know what my salaries are, okay, I feel good about this. And then all of a sudden you forget about the commission. This happens a lot. And you're like, oh my God, I paid somebody $20,000 in commission. And I just went from $50,000 to $30,000 in gross profit. And then I've got those administrative costs, now I'm losing money. Oh my God, I'm losing money, how'd that happen? And meanwhile, my salesperson's going, I just made $20,000, right? And you're going, oh, how'd that happen? So that's why this is important.